something pretty neat happened at my shop. I all of a sudden have 4 330 GTCs at my shop at the same time. On top of that, what's kind of neat in this shop right now is all 330s. I have a Series 2 330, I have my 330 America, and I have all these GTCs. The only outlier here is a GTE, but under that cover in the corner is also another 330. So this shop all of a sudden turned into a shop filled with 330s. It's kind of crazy. Sometimes it just happens like that. One will show up and then all of a sudden another one shows up, and next thing you know, you got a whole shop full of GTCs. What's neat about this is when you have 4 cars like this right next to each other and you get to work on them, you can really see the subtle changes. Now, well, before we get into the differences of a GTC, let's go over this model in particular. So a 330 GTC was built around 1967 to around 1968, 69. It started out with the 4-liter, which is the 330 cc, or is what the Ferraris would say 330 times 12 would give you approximately 4 liters. The 330 engine was originally put in this 330 America. Same thing, 330, meaning the 4-liter displacement. That was put in this road car in around 1964. But Ferrari was also building 275 engines at about the same time, so there was this interim size, which you'll remember hearing in 275 GTB, iconic sports car. And so, but the 330 engines were originally put in the 2+2s first. And eventually what they did was after the 275 GTB, which was their 2-seater Ferrari, they came out with a 330 GTC, which then got the 4-liter engine. That 4-liter engine was a very torquey engine, lots of torque compared to the 250 GTE or the 250 displacement engines. And when put in a smaller car like this, like a 330 GTC, it really came into its own. I mean, the 330 engine in my 2+2 is certainly a great power boost for this car, but the car itself is it's a 4-seater. It's a larger car. The way the engine layout is and the balance of it isn't ideal, simply because you have the 4 seats, you have the regular transmission in the front made it to the engine. But GTC wise, they got this one pretty nice. They put the engine in the front. It has a transaxle so that the transmission is in the back and drives an independent rear suspension. Meanwhile, my car is just a live rear axle. So a lot of improvements happened with the GTC in just those 3 years. The upgrades was the independent front and rear suspension with upper and lower control arms, A-arms, the coilover shocks front and back, the transmission in the back with the transaxle, the 5-speed gearbox with the gated shifter that then became iconic to Ferrari to have these gated shifters. And just an overall lightness and nimble feeling to drive in this car. I mean, it really is just a wonderful light car with also good brakes. This car has the 4-piston calipers in the front that just stop this car so much better, and compared to the earlier Dunlop brakes. These brakes move this car very much into the modern world of ability of braking. And so as a general, the 330 GTC was just a wonderful package as far as a 2-seater cruising car. Very nimble, good power, and good braking. Everything in this package is kind of where it's at. The gauge layout is very nice, and they're all right in front of you in the center binnacle. So you have the speedometer, you have the oil temp, water temp, oil pressure, and the rev counter. Off to the side, you have the ones that are not so important, which are the fuel gauge, the clock, and the ammeter, kind of set off to the side. But what's in front of you is basically right in this binnacle. And then off to here to the side are all the switches that go across the center console. You know, if you have lights,
You have A, which is the auxiliary fuel pump. You have defroster left and right, and then you have rear defroster, and then you have the interior light switch. Some cars came with air conditioning, some cars did not. So, but the center three vents either control fresh air or it controls the air conditioning. You'll know by the switches on the vents whether or not it has air conditioning. You know, a good full-size ashtray, a cigarette lighter, and the electric windows. The pedals below are underhung, so they're hung from above, not like the earlier 250s where the pedals are below. So they resemble more of what cars that we're used to seeing with the underhung pedals. So that's kind of all it is in this car. It's kind of sparse compared to modern cars, but still quite a bit of luxury that you would want in a 60s GT car. Little GTC quirks are that the gas filler cap is operated by this little lever that you have to reach way back on the back panel to pull. So let me see if I can get this for you. You know, you have to reach all the way around inside the car and pull the lever to pop the gas cap. Kind of inconvenient to have to pop the gas cap all the way from inside the car, but that's the lever on the back panel. I don't know if it's because they didn't want to run it all the way down below by the trunk, but later on some of these cars, they started to put two levers down there, so you'd have the trunk release and then the gas lever. But for some reason, on the GTC, they decided to put the gas lever in a different place, run a shorter cable, and kind of a funny little quirk about finding the gas cap release lever inside the car. Another interesting thing on the 330 GTC is that the rear taillights are similar, if not the same, to a 330 GT2+2. So I actually have one here at the shop, and you look at the taillight, it's the same taillight. The only difference is that the rear tail of a 330 2+2 is much larger, higher and taller than the GTE. Even though it has the same taillight, the trunk tapers off a little bit steeper. It's a little bit thinner. It's not as chunky compared to the 2+2 because it didn't have as much of a need to be that tall compared to the 2+2. But there's certain things on the rear bumper that looks similar to a 2+2, with the rear bumper and the bumperettes and the reverse lights. GTCs had either magnesium wheels or Barani wire wheels. This car starts to get into that age in which the modern cars are starting to move away from wire wheels. So I don't know. I kind of like the way GTCs look with the mag wheels. There's an age look to it. I think sometimes when you look at a car with wire wheels, it kind of harkens back to like a 60s, 50s, and 60s kind of look to a car. But as you start going modern, I think mag wheels are just starting to take over, and that's the modern. They're supposed to be stronger. They're just as light because they're made of a magnesium alloy, and certainly easier to clean. So let's get into comparing these four cars. Now, GTCs were made, I think, 1967, 67, 68. They were really only made for about 2 to 3 years. The last ones being the 365 GTC, which I don't have in here, but I have a pretty interesting collection of them, and it shows you just even with the four that's in here. We have an early one. The earliest one in here is this silver one, which is a 9500 serial number. I think the thing that's interesting on the early ones is the carburetors. So on early GTCs, they carbureted them with DCZs, DCZ6s, which are the same carburetors that ended up in my car. So my 330 America, which is an early car, or early 330, they put DCZs in this one too. So that's what I have in my car, and that's the same carburetor that they put in the early GTCs. So when you think about it, mine is a 5300 serial number, and this being a 9500 serial number, they were now again, they weren't necessarily put in sequential assembly, but just to show you that the early ones had a
had DCZs. The other interesting thing is the air filters are different. Obviously the air filter assemblies, because these later cars have different air cleaners, because this is a DFI carburetor. So these carburetors are definitely different than the DCZ I, but all these later cars, the 3 later cars have the same carburetors, which are these DFIs. Can't see them that well underneath the air filters, but those are DFIs, and they also have an air filter, the air filter assembly that is for a DFI. And this one's a DFI. Early GTCs, there's an interesting detail on the hoods. The hoods have this like step. In other words, the hood itself is kind of capped, the edges. It's not folded over. It's very similar to the way my hood is made. See that? But as you go to the later cars, they folded the hoods over. So this hood here, and this one's a late one. This is a 109 serial number. So when you think about it, this is a, when they went from the 9000s, now it's 10,000 serial number. So this is a 10,000 serial number, 10,900 serial number. So this is the newest one in this shop. And when you look at the white one, it's the same thing, folded over. The hood edge is folded over. But the green car is not folded over. And so the green car serial number is 9800, so not that far off from the 9500 of the silver car. So this one has an earlier hood. So GTCs wise, this is what they did. When did they actually switch over? Well, we have a pretty good, so it's got to be between the 9800, which is this car, 9800 serial number that they still showed this capped hood, where the lip is really kind of thick, the edge of the hood, to the white car here is a 107, 10,007 number, which is flat. So somewhere between then and then, and I'm sure people will start, collecting serial numbers and looking, and you might be able to get it narrowed down as to which one is which. The other interesting thing is the later cars. Let's see if I could show you a couple other things. This car is like I said, a 107 serial number, a 10,007 serial number, and it does not have an oil accumulator, which let me show you what I mean by that. A late one has this thing in it. So what Ferrari did was they put an oil cooler in these later ones, and then this one is kind of like an air oil kind of a separator type of thing. The oil cooler goes through it, and that's this one. This is the youngest of the 4 GTCs in the shop, and that has that in the car, when none of the other ones have them. So you could see and walk around the other side. This is the next youngest one in here, no oil separator. And the green one, which is the third oldest or third youngest, does not have it. This one, the valve cover is still open. I'm waiting for O-rings to seal that up, but that's still kind of in process of detailing. So the only car in here right now with the oil separator part is this late one. So that's another difference on these cars, the GTCs. So let's see, what else is different on these cars? You can see this hood pad is the original hood pad, so it has that like shiny plastic look to it, but it's also interesting to show that that's what the original hood pad is. And then I have the reproduction hood pad that is a pretty good facsimile of the one that you just saw there. See how it's like shiny but not super matte. And then just as an example, the one that's on this car is wrong. It's kind of close, but not. It has this like hatched pattern, which, you know, that's not correct, but you know, it's close. It's just not correct. The other thing that I was going to show that's kind of neat about this car, you don't notice that the headlight rings are different sizes. But when you look closely at this car, look at the lip on this headlight ring. This headlight ring, believe it or not, is wrong for this car. It's supposed, this headlight ring fits on a Series 2 330, which would be like that car. Okay? The reason is because once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's no gap on the edge. This headlight is just like about a 1/4 inch, or maybe about a 1/4 inch wider in diameter. Look at this lip. See that lip? That's the wrong headlight ring. To prove that, look at the green car. The green car's headlight ring, there is no lip. It's actually the right, fits all the way into the body. So 3 of these cars have the correct headlight ring. And the white one is wrong. The other interesting thing on these cars is that the dashes in these cars have a particular finish to them. They're kind of matte. This one has been done, but I think is done correctly. It should be pretty close to natural, almost like a tung oil. It has a little bit of a sheen to it, but that's probably the correct finish that I would accept in a car. This one, however, is a little too shiny. I think it's got that real high gloss finish to it. So yeah, this is not right. You can see how much it shines. You know, it's almost like a mirror finish. So that's been finished and incorrect. Also, the dash vinyl is a little coarse. You can see that that's not right either. You know, just to get into nitpicking about finishes, the vinyl on all this stuff is a little too rough. I'll show you what the original correct ones are supposed to look like. This vinyl, as much as it's original, it's a smoother, much smoother finish vinyl. Let's see what finishes they do with this dash. And this dash is pretty good. It's not too shiny. It's just got a little bit of a sheen to it, but it's more like a rubbed tung oil finish to it. So that's what's correct. I think the one over here is the same way. It's been unrestored, and it's a lot more matte because it has very little finish on it. You can almost see it's almost become chalky. It has a little bit of reflectivity to it, but it's not shiny, glossy as you would expect. That's the correct finish on the car. So that's another subtle difference on finishes and things like that. The other thing I noticed is when you look at the way the bumper fits, this bumper on this white one is pretty horrendous. I mean, it's the gap between the body and the bumper is pretty wide. I mean, you shouldn't be able to see that, the marker lights and everything. They should be tucked up. In fact, this one's a little bit better, but it should be tight. Look at the body gap here on this one. That's the way it should be. Those bumpers should be sucked into the grill a lot tighter. And that's what I try to achieve on this one, since I put a lot of this car back together. So the bumpers should be sucked in pretty tight to the body. You know, there is some limitations because the light sometimes gets in the way, but you shouldn't be able to see the mounting screw or the mounting bolt for that bumper. Yeah, so that's kind of neat to have 4 330s in the shop, four 330 GTCs in the shop. But always fun to compare and contrast. You could see the little differences and subtleties. Even though these cars were built over the course of only a couple of years, they still changed some of the details. So it's kind of neat to see the changes. Anyway, thanks for watching.